Hey everybody, as 2020 rolls to an end and we bid good riddance to bad rubbish, I thought I would share the story of the day my mind was blown and I knew that fish keeping was going to be a lifelong hobby for me. So it all started back in 2010, and my wife brought home a small corner tank that she had in her office at work. It was a half-gallon tank or something like that. It might even have been a 1-quart size tank. It was a little tiny triangular thing that sat right in the corner of her desk, and she was told that you can't have that kind of stuff here at the office because that makes it too, personal and human. So she brought it home, blew my mind right away because I had no idea she had been keeping fish at work. Fish keeping was something that for me I was always absolutely fascinated by, but was always afraid to get involved with because I thought it was way too complicated for me, and I just knew there was something to fish keeping that was beyond simply putting some water in a glass box and putting fish in it. There was something happening in there that made that work. That was not something you could just do. You had to understand what was going on a little bit, and I didn't. And so I always stayed away from that. And the day my wife brought home this little tank and I found out that she had been keeping these fish and it just didn't really seem to be that big of a deal, it got me rethinking about it a little bit. And so for several months, I just stared at this fish tank. It sat on our kitchen counter and I was enraptured by it. She had a couple little endlers in there, and there was a snail or two. I don't remember exactly what was in it, just a bunch of little tiny stuff swimming around in this little fish tank with a few little plastic plants, and I was just in love with this thing. And so one day I heard the inch of fish per gallon of water rule, and I realized that these couple little fish in here are, a couple inches worth of fish, and here they are in this tiny little tank. So I rushed right out and I bought a 10-gallon aquarium and got them set up in that. And since I now had a little extra room, I added a couple of other fish and we set the tank up in the office. And so now we had our first official 10-gallon fish tank, but at this point I still had no idea what was going on in there. I was still afraid to do water changes. I didn't really know what was happening when I did water changes, how often you were supposed to do them. I really knew nothing at all about fish keeping, but I was super enthusiastic about it and I'm really excited about it. And that got my friend that lives next door excited about his fish. He had been keeping fish for years, and he had a 30-gallon aquarium in his living room with a couple of small koi in it. And the tank had been up and running for 5 years. It was green on the inside. He just did the same maintenance all the time, 10% weekly, 25% monthly. He wiped down the front glass, did the filter change like clockwork, and he'd done that for years and everything was fine. And my enthusiasm rubbed off on him. I got him all excited and he was like, yeah man, this is cool. I really do like keeping fish. This is neat. And so what he did was he took his fish out of his tank, he put them in a bucket with an air stone, and he scoured his tank. He scrubbed it out, he cleaned the filter, he cleaned the gravel, he cleaned all the plastic plants and hot water and scrubbed everything down, made it look like a brand new tank. And he put his koi back in there, and within 24 hours they were swimming around funny, and within 3 days all of his koi were dead. And we were both absolutely baffled as to why cleaning his tank killed his fish. It made no sense at all. How does cleaning a tank kill the fish? You'd think the dirty tank would have killed the fish. Of course, again, knew nothing about keeping fish at the time. So he just kind of shrugged and got some new fish and didn't, I don't know. I guess they just died, Maybe the stress of the water change or something is what killed them. I, on the other hand, thought, no, something's going on here. I want to know why those fish died. So I did a Google search, basically saying I just did a huge water change. I cleaned all my filter and everything. Why did my fish die? And the first search result I got was for an article about new tank syndrome. And I thought, well, he's got it's not really a new tank, but after what he did to it, that was kind of a new tank. So maybe something here is going to apply. And of course, the first thing I found out about was the nitrogen cycle. And when I found out about the nitrogen cycle, that was the moment that my mind was absolutely blown by fish keeping. That was the thing that I didn't understand, that magic that happened in a tank that made it possible for fish to live in a box of water. Because in theory, fish just shouldn't be able to live in a box of water. Something is going on in there that makes that possible. And the nitrogen cycle is that thing that's going on in there. And so I suddenly had this different understanding of what was happening when I did water changes and what the filter. Up until then, I had been actually taking the black biofilter out of my hang on the back filter, and I had been scrubbing that out and cleaning it during water changes. I thought that was the filter. And you know, when you're doing a filter change, you clean your filters, and that's what I was doing. I was cleaning my filter. No idea what I was doing. So when I learned about the nitrogen cycle, it just absolutely blew my mind. And I had been keeping fish for a year, more or less, before I'd even heard the term nitrogen cycle. You know, so at that point, it was, again, that was the starting gun for me, and I was just, my mind was blown. Now that I understood what was going on, I really was just, you know, newly in love. I started doing research, I started reading, and I knew that I had a hobby that was going to last me for the rest of my life. Now, there's another event that took place that actually started all of this, my fish room and everything, but I'll save that for another story time if you enjoyed this one. So if you want to hear any more story times from Dan, or whatever we're going to call this video, let me know. And I can certainly share more of my stories of how I got involved in the hobby and stuff like that, because when I shoot videos to this day, I still have my very young in the hobby fish keeping self. I was in my 30s when I got started, but as far as being new to the hobby, it doesn't matter what age you are when you get involved in the hobby, it's always going to be new stuff for you. If you're 50 when you first learn about the nitrogen cycle, it's going to be just as amazing to you as if you were 10 years old and just learning about the nitrogen cycle, because until you know something, it's, you know, you have to learn it before you can actually understand it. And there's no shame in not knowing something. It's not a matter of not having the capacity to understand it. It's just, if no one's ever explained the nitrogen cycle to you before, if you've never had any reason to know about that, it's just not something you're going to know about. So when you do learn about it, that's that mind-blowing time. So I've always got that new fish keeper in mind when I'm shooting my videos. I always, you know, I'm never judgmental about questions I get. If they sound ridiculous to other people or whatever, I don't, you know, there really is no such thing as a dumb question. If you don't know something, you don't know something, and the only way you're going to find out is either by doing the research on your own, which in a lot of cases we simply can't, or you have to ask about it, you know, and until you know it, you're not going to know it. So again, I know that sounds kind of stupid to say that, but again, there's just no shame in not knowing something. If no one's ever told you this before, then how could you possibly be expected to know it? Nobody's going to get involved in the fish keeping hobby with an innate knowledge of the nitrogen cycle. That's something you learn once you get into the hobby. And how fast you learn and how, you know, the degree of seriousness, that's all up to the individual. But when I shoot my videos, I always try to think about those early days of fish keeping, the questions I had, the things that got me excited, the things that bothered me, the things that worried me. You know, I did a lot of experimenting with the different fish groups on Facebook and stuff like that. And, you know, I found my place in the fish keeping hobby of where I like to be. I found my style of fish keeping, and I've also certainly found my style of YouTube videos, and that is usually focused towards the new fish keeper, and I try to be enthusiastic and encouraging and helpful and everything else, because it's a great hobby and I love to share it with everybody. So again, that's my story. If you wanted to hear more stories like that or whatever, then by all means let me know, and I will be happy to share them with you. So good riddance 2020. Let's hope for a better 2021. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you next year.